All right. Well, thanks for staying. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you everyone for the hospitality. So I'll be talking about encrypted computation from Lattices. So let me start with a high overview of this line of work. So now we live in this world of big data where we collect a lot of sensitive data from individuals. The stuff that you buy on Alipay or on WePay, and we really care a lot about the privacy of this data, given the sensitive nature of what we're collecting. So traditional crypto wisdom says that if we want to provide the privacy of data, we can simply encrypt the data. So what this effectively does is it puts the data under a lock, so that the only way to have access to this data is to have the key, and without the key, you learn nothing whatsoever about the data. So this solves the problem of privacy, but you lose utility because once the data is encrypted, you can no longer do any meaningful computation on the data. So today, for this for the last talk, we'll be looking at the a new cryptographic paradigm of encrypted computation that tries to reconcile our needs for privacy and utility in some meaningful way. So in particular, we'll be looking at three different notions of primitives for encrypted computation. We'll see how we can construct these primitives from lattices. And I think what's also very interesting and what I want to emphasize is that underlying all of these three different constructions of three different primitives is one simple algebraic equation. So I'll try to convey all of that to you. And let me say that before I go on, that I'm very happy to take questions during the talk. 用中文问也可以. Alright, okay, so but I may reply in English. Alright, so I'm going to start with fully homomorphic encryption. Probably most of you have already seen a little bit about it, but let me try to say what it is anyway. So before that, let me start with encryption. So in this context of this first part of the talk, I'm going to be looking at secret key encryption. So a bit unlike, let's say, let's talk. Where so you have encryption scheme is specified by a pair of algorithms, an encryption algorithm and decryption algorithm. Both algorithms share a secret key. Alright, and the basic functionality requirement says that if you encrypt a message X and you decrypt to get a ciphertext, and if you decrypt the ciphertext, you get back X, which is what you started off with. Right? And we also have a security requirement which says that encryption of X should hide X, so it should reveal no information about X. And this should be true even if you use the same secret key to encrypt different messages. This is an explicit requirement in the context of secret key encryption. Alright, so the main difference from standard encryption for fully homomorphic encryption or FHE is that there's an additional algorithm, often referred to as eval or evaluation, that takes the encryption of X and some function F and allows you to compute an encryption of X. Right? And what's really interesting here is that this eval algorithm does not require knowledge of the secret key. Okay, so all it needs to read is the ciphertext. So one of the biggest breakthrough in our generation maybe is that FHE actually exists. So FHE being fully homomorphic encryption. Moreover, we can have basically FHE for general computation as described by circuits, and you can get these interpretations from standard lattice assumptions. So in some way, I think of FHE as sort of like the cryptographic analog of the internet, in the sense that for most of you in this room, you probably take FHE for granted. It's something that has always existed. And for the minority of us in this room who were born before the 90s, it's like one of the biggest breakthroughs in our lives. Right, so let me try to tell you what this, how this construction works. Right, so in particular, I'm going to be focusing on the construction due to Gen 3 Eigen Vectors. Alright, so I'm going to be describing the construction in three steps. Okay? The first step is, the first idea towards the construction is to omit the security requirement. Okay? So I'm going to give you an insecure encryption scheme that is fully homomorphic. Alright? So you may ask, well, if it's insecure, then the encryption of X can simply be X, and then a homomorphic evaluation will be completely trivial. So the whole point of this insecure scheme is that it should be not too difficult to make it secure. Alright? So if I give you X in the clear, it seems like it's going to be really hard to turn it into a secure encryption. Okay? So here's our first aim, to construct an encryption scheme that's fully homomorphic, ignoring the security requirement, which says that you should have X. Okay? Alright, so here's what the encryption scheme looks like. To specify the encryption scheme, first let me tell you what the secret key is. Okay? So the secret key is going to be a row vector defined over ZQ. So throughout this talk, we're going to be working over some read, ZQ being the modulus that we typically use for LWE. And we're going to stop talking about Q. And in general, we'll be talking about vectors and matrices. I'm going to try to avoid talking about dimensions of vectors and matrices, but rather I'm going to be drawing pictures with basically rectangles. Okay, so this is a row vector, so it's something very wide. So this is your secret key. Think of T as a uniformly random row vector over ZQ, which means that each of the entries is independently random over ZQ. In general, think of Q as being a large value. Right? Encryption of X is going to be a matrix. In fact, it's going to be a square matrix. Right? With the property that an encryption of X is the square matrix A, with the property that T times A is equal to X times T. Okay? So think of A as a uniformly random matrix subject to the constraint that T times A is equal to X times T. So if you remember from your high school in algebra, T is basically what we call Eigenvector of the matrix A with eigenvalue X. Okay, so this is roughly what the construction looks like. Since we're ignoring security, distribution is a bit less important, but it's still convenient to think of them as uniformly random subject to this constraint. Any questions so far? Alright, so this is your encryption. Decryption is fairly easy because you multiply to decrypt, you take T multiplied by A. You get X times T, you divide that by T, you learn what X is. Okay? It's also not difficult to see that the scheme is insecure since you can pick out X essentially by Gaussian elimination. Right? But we'll solve that problem later. And first we try to figure out how to do homomorphic evaluation. Okay? Alright, so what does homomorphic evaluation mean? So you are given many different encryptions of different values under the same T. Alright, so you are given encryption of X1, X2, X3, X4, all of them under the same T. Right? And basically, to handle homomorphic encryption for general circuits, it's sufficient to explain to you how to handle homomorphic evaluation for addition and homomorphic evaluation for multiplication. Okay? So I need to give you a way to combine given encryption of X1 and encryption of X2 to get an encryption of X1 plus X2 and an encryption of X1 times X2. Okay? So here's what we need to do. Alright, so let's first handle addition first. So given encryption A1, which is the encryption of X1, and A2, which is the encryption of X2, we want to get an encryption of X1 plus X2. Okay? Here is fairly straightforward. To get an encryption of X1 plus X2, you basically just add the two cytopacks. Okay? And correctness basically follows from the fact that T times A1 plus A2 is X1 plus X2 times T. Any questions? Alright, good. So the bigger challenge here, I guess, is multiplication. Right? So you want to come up with a matrix. Right? Ideally, a matrix in the same dimension as before, with the property that T times this new matrix is equal to X1 times X2 times T. So any suggestions for how you can combine A1 and A2 to get a new matrix with this property? 用中文回答也可以。The question is, you're given A1, which is the encryption of X1, and A2 is the encryption of A2. How do you get an encryption of X1 times X2? How do you combine the matrices A1 and A2 together to get a new matrix with the property that T times this new matrix is X1 times X2 times T?
Multiply A1 and A2?
Great, right. Multiply A1 times A2. Okay, so exactly that works. Thank you. So if you look at T times A1, T times A1 times A2 is exactly X1 times X2 times T. Right? That's just because if you multiply T by A1, you get X1 times T, and then the T multiplied by X2 gives you X1 times X2 times T. Right? This is actually just a general property of eigenvalues under addition and multiplication of matrices. So you probably have already seen this. And what's nice about this construction is that it extends to any polynomial. So if you have encryption of X1, X2, X3, and X4, And if you want to get to, let's say, encryption of x1 times x2 plus x3 plus x4, you basically just do the same computation with matrices replaced by the scalars. Okay? So if you multiply a1 by a2 plus a3 times a4, this is exactly encryption of x1, x2 plus x3 times x4. Okay? So this is very nice. Basically, to do homomorphic evaluation, you just do the entire computation depending on matrices or scalars. Right? So that solves basically the problem of homomorphic evaluation. Alright, so this works in general, if you have any polynomials, this is what you can do. And throughout this talk, I'm going to think of f of a1 up to a, and I'm going to very often call it a sub f. Okay. Alright, so now we need to solve our second problem. So I'm going to show you how to modify this scheme so that you satisfy security, so that encryption of x has x. But along the way, we're going to ruin functionality. So I'm going to give you a secure encryption scheme that is no longer fully homomorphic. Alright? And then we'll see in the third step how to restore functionality in a way that preserves security as well. Okay? Alright, so here's the basic idea. We're basically going to add noise to the scheme. Right? So roughly speaking, an encryption of x is no longer an exact eigenvalue of A, an exact eigenvector of a matrix with exact eigenvector T, but rather is an approximate eigenvector T in the following sense. So encryption of x is going to be of xi is going to be a random matrix AI, such that T times AI is close to xi times T. Okay, close in the sense of, let's say, L to norm. Right? So it's short, not in the sense of having weights. Okay? So the intuition, roughly speaking, follows from LWE, which says that when you have noise, Gaussian elimination no longer works, and that data is secure. Okay? So for this, you're going to have to just trust me for now. In a couple more slides, I'll give you an actual encryption scheme with this property that's provably secure under the LWE assumption. Right? So let's just believe for now that if you have this invariant, then you have symmetric security. Okay? So the difference, when I put approximately equal, it means that there's a difference of a value that's small. Right? Small means that each of the entries in copy is much smaller than Q. Alright, so let's see if this scheme is still fully homomorphic. It's not going to be, but let's see how far we can go. Alright, let's first try addition. So we try we repeat what we did before, and given A1 and A2, which are encryption of x1 and x2, we try to produce an encryption of x1 plus x2 by adding the two matrices together. Okay? Now, turns out this sort of works. Basically, by linearity, you know that T times, basically this is correct, as long as, this follows basically from the fact that small plus small is still small. Okay? Now, the small on the right-hand side is going to be slightly bigger small than the previous small, but let's just ignore the issue for now. Okay, well, whether you deal with things being small, becoming a little bit less small, but as long as they stay generally small, we're going to be okay. Alright? So this is okay for addition. Let's see what happens when we try to multiplication. Alright, so the problem, multiplication basically doesn't work anymore. So T times A1 times A2 is not going to be close to x1 times x2 times T anymore. And that basically follows from the fact that if you try to do the same analysis from before, the problem is that there's this small term over here, and small times A2, in general you should think of A2 as being a random matrix. So A2 in general is going to have large entries, and the problem basically is that when you take small, multiply by random matrix, you get something big. So you lose correctness, and here's comes the third idea. Alright? So the main problem with correctness is that small times random is big, so we're going to solve this problem essentially by making A2 small. Alright? So basically what we're going to get, so now what is our encryption scheme? Instead of picking a random matrix AI, such that T times AI is close to xi times T, I'm going to pick a random small matrix, a random matrix with small entries, such that T times AI is close to xi times T. Okay? The non-triviality here is that there may not exist matrices with small entries whose eigenvector is T. But let's suppose we can make this work out. Right? We can sample small distributions such that T times AI is xi times T. Okay? Now suppose that's true, then now our multiplication works, because now small times A2 is small since A2 is small. Alright, so that basically solves our correctness problem. And more generally, this extends to any polynomial. Basically, since addition is small errors, multiplication is small errors, any general polynomial, you still get something small. Alright, so that's basically, this basically gives you a framework for realizing homomorphic encryption. So now I just need to tell you how you can instantiate an encryption scheme under the LW assumption with the following properties, that basically an encryption of X is a matrix A such that T times A is close to X times T, and then A should hide X and A should be small. Okay? Alright, so here's where I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. Okay, so let's try, like before, we're going to try to, so we have 3 requirements. We're going to try to meet the first requirement first, and then meet the second requirement, and then try to meet them one by one, while violating some of them along the way, and then we'll see eventually how to satisfy all the requirements at the same time. Okay? So our secret key now is still going to be a row vector, okay? Except instead of being a uniformly random vector, it's going to be a uniformly random vector with the constraint that the large coordinate is -1. So I called this, the first part of it, the uniformly random part S, and this should remind you of the LW secret. So the vector S here is going to be corresponds to the LW secret when we reduce the security of our encryption scheme to the LW assumption. Okay. Right, let me first tell you how to encrypt. So how do I construct a matrix A such that T times A is close to X times T? Okay. Where T is of the form S minus 1. Okay. So right, this means uniformly random row vector followed by -1 on the right, being the last entry. Alright, so encryption is going to be randomized. So first observe that basically if we start out with a LWE sample with respect to the secret S, so with a random LWE matrix, and we'll call it B over here. If I stack B on top of SB plus E, this matrix has a property that if I multiply it by T on the right hand side, it's going to give you something small. In fact, the small here is exactly the LWE error. Okay? And this works for B of essentially any dimensions, but you should think of B as more or less a wide matrix. Alright? So now you have something with the property that T times blah is close to 0, whereas what we want is T times blah to be close to X times T. Turns out this is easy to fix. Now if you simply add X times the identity matrix, so for now think of B as just slightly wider, so that adding by the identity matrix makes sense, synthetically, then this expression over here, which you think of as your A, has exactly the property that T times A is close to X times T. Alright? Because basically, T times the first component here is small, and T times the second component over there is X times T, and then by linearity you get X times T. Any questions? In fact, by the LW assumption, if you call this your A, it actually hides X under the LW assumption, basically because, by the LW assumption, B and SB plus E is pseudo-random. Then you can replace this with random as just a one-time pad that completely masks X times I. Right? So that gives you semantic security. Now the problem, however, is that this A is big, it's not going to be small. In general, in the LW assumption, remember that you need to pick B to essentially be a uniformly random matrix. Right? So the B part of the ciphertext is already going to be random, and the SB plus E part is essentially going to be random also. We know that it looks random, so most of the entries are going to be big. Okay, when you add X times I to it will still remain big. So now the next challenge is to take this matrix and turn it into something small. In fact, we're going to give you a general mechanism to take any matrix over ZQ and turn it into a small matrix. Right? The exact notion of small that we're aiming for is going to be that A is going to have 0, 1 entries. Okay? Alright, so now I'm going to describe to you a general mechanism to take any matrix over ZQ and turn it into a 0, 1 matrix. Okay, well, essentially preserving the same information. Okay? So intuitively what we're going to do is to basically take the binary representation of the matrix M. Okay? So what does that statement even mean? So given the matrix M, right, for basically this works for matrices of any dimensions, it could be wide, it could be tall, we can turn it essentially into a 0-1 matrix, corresponds roughly to the binary representation, by considering a matrix that has height, by increasing the height by the factor of log Q. Alright, so what do? You think of a big M and turn it into a much taller matrix, where basically this is a matrix with log Q blocks, log Q vertical blocks. The first block is going to be the least significant bit of M. What this means is basically each entry is going to be the least significant bit of each of the entries in M. Okay? The next block is basically going to be the second bit of M, which corresponds to basically a matrix where every bit is the second bit of the corresponding entry in M. And then the bottommost block is going to be correspond to the most significant bit of M, where basically this is a matrix where every bit is the most significant bit of the corresponding entry in M. Okay? So this is basically, in some sense, a binary representation of M. It has the property that it basically contains homomorphic information as M, except each of the entries is now small, they're going to be 0 and 1. Okay? Moreover, it has the following very nice property, namely that if you multiply this matrix on the left by another matrix G, which is a fixed matrix, so you can basically apply a linear combination to this matrix and recover the original matrix M. And this fixed matrix is what we're going to call G here, which we also refer to as a gadget matrix. So this G is not the same G as for the generated matrix of the error correcting code that you saw in Buddyman desktop, but this G is going to be the following fixed matrix. It's basically going to be the matrix that is I, 2i, 4i, up to Q over 2 times I. So the height is going to be the same as the height of M, the width is log Q times y. Okay? It's easy to check that if you multiply G by this binary representation of M, you get back M. Because the I interacts with the least significant bit, the most significant bit gets multiplied by Q over 2, which gives you exactly the most significant bits. And then if you add everything up, you're basically multiplying the binary representation by the powers of 2, which gives you back the original entries of the matrix. Okay? Alright, and because of this relation, for this talk we're going to call this binary representation of the matrix M G inverse of M. Okay, so this is actually an operation on the matrix that turns into a 0-1 matrix. We write G inverse because G times G inverse in some sense is G. Right? So it's sort of like the functional inverse. You should think of it as the G inverse matrix multiplied by M. Think of G inverse as a functional computation, whereas G is a fixed matrix. Any questions? Alright, so in general, this is a general mechanism to make the matrix small. So here's the equation that we started out with, which has the t times a equals close to x times t requirement that we want. It has a property that it hides x. Now we're going to try to make this a part small by basically applying G inverse to it. Okay? So first we want to preserve the same equation. So the equal here should be approximately equal. So we want to apply this. We want the same equality to hold. So we're going to apply G inverse to our A, and then to make sure equality holds, we need to left multiply that by G. Okay? Again, this should be approximately equal. So this G essentially cancels out G inverse, so we still have the same equation as before. Alright? So now, if you think of this part as your A, including the G inverse part, you have the requirement that A is small, but the main catch is that you lose this equation over here, because there's an extra G on this side, and this G doesn't appear on the right hand side. Okay? Ideally, you introduce an extra G here. You want to define T to be the original T multiplied by this G, but if you do that, you need to have a G on the right hand side. Okay? Now to fix this problem, turns out what you can do is basically take this I here and replace it by G. Alright? If you replace the I by G, which is a much wider matrix, you also need to make B wider, but that's fine, but the LW assumption is still random. And now you have the property, if you replace the I part by G, on the right hand side you actually get that by G. And now if you define T to be your original T times G, then you get back the equation that you wanted above. Okay? And you simultaneously satisfy all of the requirements. This is now your T, it's going to have the property that this times this is close to x times T. This, by the LW assumption, hides x. Okay, so this is already random, hides x. Applying G inverse to it still hides x. And because of G inverse, this whole thing produces a small matrix. Okay? That's basically the entire construction. Alright? Okay, that's about that. If you got a little bit lost, you can ignore most of this, just remember the equation on top. Okay? But this is basically the entire construction underlines one of the cryptographic breakthroughs of our generation. Right. So I do want to go into a little bit more detail, namely the issue of small. Okay? So I talked about small, small, small. I say if you multiply two small things, you get something small, but the small is a bit bigger than before. So let me try to go into a bit more detail to understand what all this different hierarchy of small really means. Alright. So in our basic scheme, basically to make things small, what do? We basically have a matrix that's basically over ZQ. We make it small by taking the binary representation. So G inverse of M1 is a binary matrix, 0, 1 entries. Well, whenever we want to multiply two matrices together, we first take the binary representation and then multiply the binary representation together. Right? That's basically what we're doing. Now, the problem in general is that if I have two 0, 1 matrices and I multiply them together, you don't get a 0, 1 matrix. You get matrices that where the entries are somewhat smaller. It's bigger by basically a factor that is dimension of the matrices. So if the matrices have small dimension, it's still small, but it's not that small. So you go from 0, 1 entries to something quite a bit bigger. And in general, when you try to do a homomorphic evaluation for a degree f polynomial, your small is going to increase exponentially by a factor that depends on the degree of f. Okay, so if you multiply L01 matrices together, then the norm of the new matrix is going to be roughly n to the L, where n is the dimension of the original matrix. Okay, so this is actually a pretty big growth. Turns out you can get a lot of leverage by sort of working with this G inverse a little bit differently. Okay? So what you do is, whenever you want to multiply M1 by M2, you don't compute the G inverse first and then multiply the two G inverse together. Instead, you apply G inverse to M2 first, multiply it by M1, and then take the whole thing and compute G inverse on it. Okay? The thing to observe about these two equations is that if you multiply G on the left-hand side to this equation and multiply G by this equation, you actually get the same quantity, which is M1 times G inverse of M2. But the difference between the two is that this matrix may not have 0, 1 entries, but this matrix has 0, 1 entries. Right? So you get a lot of leverage by making sure that instead of doing G inverse individually as you go along, you do G inverse at the very end of the computation. Okay? And now, by applying this idea, you can actually get a blow up in small that instead of being the degree of the function, you can get it actually to be log of the degree of the function. Okay. Any questions? I'm slightly cheating here, but it's more or less correct. Alright, so this is one of the ideas that we use to make sure that the smalls don't grow too much. Right? This sort of how small, we want the small not to grow too much because it sort of affects the quality of the LW assumption. We want to control the noise. If the noise is small, you get security under LW under qualitatively weaker assumptions about LW. Okay? So this is one of the ideas by which we make this small value small. I want to also describe the second idea from the literature for controlling small values. Okay, the second idea is that, well, in general, we actually want to do homomorphic evaluation of circuits. Right? So, if you think about circuit evaluation, then basically, if you think about the top as being the input wires and the one below as the output wire, and this is essentially an AND gate, which is like a multiplication gate, basically for each step of the computation, your noise is going to grow by a factor of n, where n corresponds essentially to the dimension of the matrix, or you can think of n as being the dimension of the LW sequence. So if you have a circuit of that d, basically the noise grows by exponentially in d. Okay? So actually something more useful to do is, instead of thinking about circuits, you think about branching programs, where branching programs is essentially what was defined in Elec's lecture. We have the property that basically whenever, the difference between circuit and branching program is basically that in a circuit you could potentially multiply two locations in memory, whereas in branching programs you only multiply things in memory by an original input. Now the advantage shown here is that your noise grows a lot less because basically since you always multiply something from the input, you really get something like the previous noise plus n times the original input noise. And if you work this out, basically you end up being a case where the final solution of small is basically n times the length of the branching program. Right? And now if you use the fact that log depth circuits can be computed by branching programs of polynomial length, then you actually end up in a situation where if you work with branching programs, you get a noise blow up that's polynomial in n because you only grow, the noise only increases by the length of the branching program, compared to n to the log n, which is what happens when you deal with log depth circuits. So this difference between a polynomial and an exponential block turns out to be quite important, and by working with a branching program, you can basically get constructions for FHE for log depth circuits under polynomial hardness assumptions rather than some exponential hardness assumptions. So this idea was introduced for FHE was sort of done in 2014, but it was introduced in a different context in the year before. So this is all I want to say about small. Okay, so for the second part of the first half, I'm going to try to describe this one equation unifying different constructions that I tried to promise that I promised at the beginning of the talk. So I want to revisit this Eigenvector approach towards FHE and try to understand what's really going on over there. So I'm going to start back by working with our insecure scheme. Our insecure scheme relies on the following very simple lemma, which says that if you have a bunch of matrices, AI, that share the same common eigenvector T with respect to different eigenvalues, if you start applying a polynomial to this collection of matrices, you get a new matrix whose eigenvector is still T, but eigenvalue is f of x. This basically follows from the fact that when you add two matrices together, you add the eigenvalues, you multiply two matrices together, you multiply the eigenvalues. Okay? So this sort of underlies our fully homomorphic encryption scheme, and then to make it secure, we add noise to it. Okay? So this is the magical equation that we started out with. So what I want to do is to try to generalize this equation to get a more general algebraic relation. Okay? What do I mean by generalization here? Now the first lemma is restricted to settings where we have a bunch of matrices that share the same eigenvector. My goal is to have a more general statement that applies to any matrices whether they do or do not share the same eigenvector. Right? So a bunch of any arbitrary matrices. And here's the strengthening of this lemma that we're going to come up with. I'm going to tell you what the statement is, and then we'll verify that it is indeed a generalization of lemma 1, and then we'll see how you prove this lemma 2. Okay? So the statement of lemma 2 is going to look a bit complicated. So you just have to stare at it for a moment, and then we'll just go over it a little bit slowly. Okay? So roughly speaking, I'm going to claim that this is in some sense the correct generalization of lemma 1. Okay? That for all A, for all x's, that some f with certain properties. Alright? The first sanity check we want to do is to make sure that lemma 2 is indeed a generalization of lemma 1. Okay? Now, the first thing I want you to observe about lemma 2 is that there is no reference to an eigenvector. Okay? Lemma 2 is a statement about any matrices. Alright? With only the requirement that there's some extra matrix H that depends on the matrices that you set up. But otherwise, this on the left-hand side, it applies to any matrices A1 up to AN. And on the right-hand side, you have AF, where AF is as before, basically you just apply the function f to the original matrices. Okay? So this is a statement. As a first sanity check, I want to, the claim is that lemma 2 is a strengthening of lemma 1. Okay? So I want to first convince you that lemma 2 implies lemma 1, and then I'll convince you that lemma 2 is true. Okay? Now, why is lemma 2 a generalization of lemma 1? Turns out you can deduce lemma 1 from lemma 2 by multiplying both sides by t. Okay? What happens when you multiply both sides by t? Now, if you have a collection of matrices, so I claim that lemma 2 implies lemma 1, so what happens? So I want to prove lemma 1, assuming lemma 2 is true. Okay? So I have the matrices with the property that t times ai is equal to ai times t. So now what happens when I apply t, when I multiply t to the left-hand side of lemma 2? Okay? So t times this quantity is going to be 0, just because t times ai is x times t, xi times t. Okay? So t times the left-hand side is going to be 0, which means that t times right-hand side is equal to 0. And t times right-hand side equals to 0 is exactly t times af equals to f of x times t. Any questions? Alright, so what have I done so far? I have shown you lemma 1. Earlier I've convinced you that lemma 1 is true. Okay? I showed you lemma 2, and I convinced you that lemma 2 implies a statement that we know is true, but that's not enough to convince you that lemma 2 itself is true. Alright? So just because a statement implies a true statement doesn't mean that the statement is true. Okay? So for the rest of this thing before the break, I will try to convince you that lemma 2 is true. Okay? In fact, I will present a stronger statement, a stronger variant of lemma 2, and also convince you that the stronger variant is true. Right? So, okay. So, if you get nothing else from the first half, this should be the one that you remember. Okay? If you get a bit lost during the proof, that's alright. Alright, so I now want to prove that lemma 2 is true. Okay, as before, if I want to prove a statement about any polynomial f, I just need to only handle addition and multiplication. Okay? Alright, let's start with addition. So I have the left-hand side, alright, which is whatever corresponds to here for n equals to 2. The right-hand side is exactly the right-hand side from before. Remember, AF is basically applying the function f to the matrices. So A of addition is just A1 plus A2. So that's the expression on the right-hand side. What I need to do is to construct a matrix H with the property that this thing multiplied by this matrix H is exactly this thing on the right-hand side. Okay? So basically, what is the thing about the lemma of this statement, right? The left-hand side is fixed. The right-hand side is fixed. The only non-trivial part of the lemma statement is to prove the existence of this matrix H. Okay? So I'm going to prove this matrix exists for addition, which is x1 plus x2, and then prove that it exists for x1 times x2. Alright? So now I need to construct a matrix H with the property that this times H is equal to this thing on the right-hand side. Alright? So let me try. Alright, actually I gave it away. I meant to ask you. Alright, so it turns out if you pick H to be 2 copies of the identity matrix, it checks out perfectly. Okay? So you should think of this product as this times this, plus this times this, which is exactly the right answer. Alright, any questions? Okay. Alright, the more interesting part is multiplication. Okay? So, alright, so multiplication. We know what we want the left-hand side to be. We know what we want the right-hand side to be. Again, remember, A sub multiplication is just multiplying the two matrices together, so it's A1 times A2. Alright? And now, I want to construct a matrix H such that blah times H is A1 times A2 minus x1 times x2 times I. Okay? In the previous slide, this H is very simple, it's just two identity matrices. In fact, the H has the property that is completely independent of the X and the matrices that you started out with. Okay? The construction here for multiplication is a little bit more delicate. Okay? So note the order of quantifiers here. I wrote H as H sub F, comma X. In particular, H is allowed to depend on F, it's allowed to depend on X, and by the order of quantifiers, in fact, H is allowed to depend on A1 and A2. Okay? Alright? In fact, the fact that H needs to depend on A1 and A2 is already inherent. Right? And even though H depends on A1 and A2 is going to be fine, lemma 2 still implies lemma 1. Just because 0 times H is 0, it doesn't matter what the H is. Okay? Alright, so, right. So, what do we do? I'm first going to tell you what the top half of this H is going to be. It's going to be A2. Okay? Why does A2 make sense? Because when you multiply this A1 by this A2, this gives you A1 times A2. Alright? Now the problem, however, is that when you multiply these two things together, you start getting cross terms. For instance, you get x1 times A2. Okay? And there is no x1 times x1 times A2 on the right hand side. Right? So you need to somehow cancel out this term. Okay? At the same time, notice that there is a x1 times x2 times on the right hand side, which hasn't shown up yet. So any suggestions for what the bottom half of this matrix should be? Right, okay, good. So it's basically x1 times 1. Okay? So as a first sanity check, this times this exactly gives you this moment. Okay? Now the non-trivial interaction is to check that this times this exactly cancels out this times this. Okay? So x1 I times a2 exactly cancels out a2 times x1. So these cross terms cancel out, and basically you end up with a1 times a2, which is this thing over here, and x2 times x1, which is this thing over here. Okay? So I already explained to you how you get addition and multiplication, and then you can sort of do a bit of massaging and you can handle the polynomials. Alright, so proof by induction. Any questions at this point? Okay, this is not to be quite enough for application. We need something slightly stronger. Right? Because this is basically, this equation will basically give you the insecure fully homomorphic encryption scheme. So we need a variant of this statement that sort of handles noise when we add noise to preserve semantic security. Right? So what do we want? So what we want is a much stronger statement. Let me first say what the statement is. Okay? In this new statement, we're not going to be working with square matrices AI. We're going to work with rectangular matrices AI. And instead of working with I, we're going to work with the gadget matrix G, where G is basically the matrix that is I, 2, I, 4, I, 8, I, and so on and so forth. Okay? So these are now much wider matrices. Alright? This basically sums out the matrices that you have. You eat shit every day, and then you get something much wider. Okay? Alright, so this is what we want. So the equation we're going to get now is basically a one equation where the A's are going to be much wider matrices. So AI has the same dimension as G, so that A plus G makes sense. And the claim is that the following stronger statement is true. Okay? So AI is the AI over here. The identity matrix is replaced by this gadget matrix G. There is an A sub F on the right hand side. The A sub F has the same dimension of the AI's. Okay? So AF is sort of not as well defined as before because you cannot multiply two rectangular matrices together. But AF for now is very related to the original AF. It's as if you multiply the matrices together. So there is some AF. And the difference from before is that instead of just guaranteeing that there exists some matrix H, I'm going to claim a stronger statement. I'm going to claim that there exists a matrix H with small entries. Okay? Not just any H, but H with small entries. Now, why is it useful to have H with small entries? Because we know that small things are useful. Small objects have the property that small times small is small. So a small h has a guarantee that small times h is still small, whereas a big H doesn't have the guarantee. Alright, so if nothing else, hopefully you can remember the statement of this lemma, which is basically, this lemma basically underlies most of the advanced cryptographic constructions of the past decades. Okay, so, alright, so as before I prove this statement, let me try to convince you that this statement is interesting. Okay? Right, so like I said, the main reason why this statement is more useful and more interesting is that H is small, which means that it's sometimes robust to noise, robust to small values. In particular, a corollary of this statement is a noisy version of lemma 1. Okay? Where instead of t times ai is exactly equal to xi times t, you get a robust version that holds even for t times ai is close to xi times t times g. Alright? So, so the robust version here sort of looks a bit like the previous thing, except there's an extra g over here. So there's t on both sides, right? There's g. And now I claim that lemma 2 implies lemma 1. And basically the proof is the same as before, except now if you multiply t on both sides, you no longer get t times the left hand side is 0, but rather you get t times this quantity is small, where the notion of small is the small exactly over here. Alright? Now, since small times small is small, you get that t times the right hand side is small, which basically gives you this equation on the right hand side. Okay? So it implies a version of lemma 1 that's now robust to noise that works with the approximate setting. And this is a different way by which you can sort of derive our earlier efficiency. Okay? Another corollary is that it implies a version of this statement where you have some algebraic secret multiplied by this and some extra noise over on the right hand side, over an additional term. Just because e times small times small is again small. Right? And this is going to be somewhat useful later for the design of other advanced cryptographic primitives. So, alright, so again, I want to prove to you this statement is true. Alright? And like before, we're going to follow the previous framework, which is I just need to convince you that this statement is true for addition and also true for multiplication. Okay. Alright, so for addition, well, let's try what we started out with, and turn out if you use the same features before with identity on top of the identity, everything checks out. Okay. So your A sub f for addition is basically A1 plus A2, and then everything else checks out. And since the identity matrix has 0, 1 entries, this matrix H has 1 entries. Okay. Alright, so the interesting part is multiplication. Alright. Now I want to sort of use the construction as before. This is basically the same H from before, except I have A2 here and X1I over here. That's the H that we have. I sort of blinded out the A2 because, first of all, there are two problems with trying to put in A2 as before. The first problem is that A2 is big. It may not be small. The second is that A1 times A2 is even well defined because they are both rectangular matrices and you can multiply them both together. Okay. So now the question is what to put on top of here. Or as a first sanity check, this is exactly this thing on the right hand side. So, so I'm just going to tell you what works. Basically, if you put G inverse of A2, which is sort of the small version of A2, then everything checks out. Okay? So if you put G inverse of A2 over here, you have the property that this whole thing is small because G inverse produces a matrix of 0, 1 entries. So this whole thing has 0, 1 entries. Okay? And the cross term cancels out because x1 times G inverse basically gives you x1 times A2, and this cancels out with the cross term over here. Okay? Now, except this term over here, instead of A1 times A2 as before, which in fact we know doesn't make sense because you can multiply two rectangular matrices, this AF for the multiplication becomes A1 times G inverse of A2, which is this A1 times this G inverse of A2. Alright, so that all checks out, and this is basically the new equation that we end up with. So A times is no longer A1 times A2, but rather A1 times G inverse of A2. And this generalizes to an arbitrary polynomial F as well. Right? So that basically concludes the proof of this statement. Right. So for the rest of I guess the second half of the talk, we won't quite need the proof of this statement anymore. Just remember that this statement is true, and in fact, this statement basically underlies a couple of recent cryptographic construction from lattices, from attribute-based encryption to fully homomorphic signatures to constraint PRFs. I'm not going to quite define what these two objects are, but just say that these are things that people care about. And basically, in each of these constructions, basically these matrices A sub F and this magical small matrix H plays different roles, depending on what the primitive you're trying to construct is. So, different primitives have different interfaces, and basically they all follow from this A sub F and this H matrix. Right? So let me say that looking ahead to the second half, we're going to be looking at how you can use this equation to construct attribute-based encryption. So, alright, that's all for the first half. I'll give you the questions for the break. Right, in some sense you can think of lemma 2 as implicit in previous statements. Yeah. Implicit in the construction that was used in previous papers. Do you get any improvement? No. Well, you get a conceptual improvement in the sense that you get a better sense of where the correctness comes from. So in some sense, you don't get any qualitative improvements directly in the results, in the statements themselves. But you get more like a unified construction in some sense. And in particular, you do get improvement in the following sense that, what happened was that we have this statement, okay? We know that it's true for the original, most of the original construction started out with this statement for circuits, where H basically grows, with the depth of the circuit, exponentially with the depth of the circuit. Now we can prove the same statement where H grows polynomially for NC1 circuits. And then once you have this equation that where it grows polynomially, like I alluded to earlier, then you get all of the previous, all of these objects for NC1 circuits with polynomial hardness rather than exponential.